so cold out there.
I'm in a lot of pain. Give me morphine, give me morphine.
12, 13, 14 teams. Where are they?
It just never ended. Bushwhack, 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 bushwhack.
We need a pulse below the injury and treat him for shock. Understand?
23 teams of 4 from around the world converge on the northern coast of British Columbia. They will participate in what is known as the pinnacle of adventure racing in Canada. For 6 non-stop days, they will race over 500 kilometers, navigating some of the most rugged terrain in the world. They will test their skills, teamwork, and most of all, they will test themselves. This is Wave the North Extreme.
In Europe and Scotland, and we're having a really good year. Last 6 or 8 months have been really good for us, actually, and just that we're the team to beat and one of the more experienced teams here and so on. And I think there's a lot of pressure. It's not something we wear on our shoulders, and everybody at the starting line is handed the same maps, the same course, the same boat, the same weather, and it's a big level playing field. You gotta be humble in this sport.
Also in contention for top 5 is heavily favored Helly Hansen Momar.
We've definitely given ourselves a shot at top 5. With an outside shot at a bit better than that.
I think we're a solid team in terms of speed, so I think it's gonna play out well anyway.
We're paddling those inflatable freaking kayaks.
That's a challenge for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you're sitting in water the whole time. They only go so fast. Then we have to inflate and deflate. We carry them with us on a couple of stages. I think that's probably going to be one of the most mentally draining things in the entire event. It definitely seems like one of the toughest things you could ever do.
Cyril Rayan of Team Dart Noon was injured in a car crash 2 weeks ago that left him with 2 cracked ribs and a sprained wrist. Despite his injuries, he will attempt the race.
It's very hard to find perfection before a race. If you always wait for everything to be perfect, you show up with what you've got, and sometimes you're very surprised what you can do.
An experienced team's supplier pipeline presents a fierce competitive spirit.
I got into adventure racing because of my husband. So Lawrence is actually designing this race course, and man, I try, but I don't get any inside scoop.
Not all teams have the expectation of top 5. Many see the race as a once-in-a-lifetime journey where they will push themselves physically and emotionally to the limit.
I'm the dad, my daughter Laura, and my son Adam. Also my good friend here, Pete here. I'd like to say I'm not the oldest, but I know she is the youngest at age 19.
Yeah, he definitely is the oldest.
And best looking.
On British Columbia's north coast, you don't control nature, you pay attention to her every mood. Here, eagles, bears, and whales outnumber the people. It's a raw, virgin landscape. With 10,000 years of human occupation by the Tsimshian Nation, it is the oldest continually inhabited region in North America. This is natural Canada at its raw and untamed best. Prince Rupert is the marshalling area for the race. Teams have flown in from all over the world to compete on Raid the North.
Well, it's going to be interesting because we've got teams from so many different places. Teams coming from Singapore, teams from Southern American states, California, where the weather's warmer. They may not be as used to sort of the wet and unpredictable mountain conditions we've got. We've got a lot of good, strong Canadian teams as well that have been in the mountains before. So it's tough to predict who's going to really win it.
The race course is a tightly guarded secret and is revealed to the competitors just one day before the race. That gives the teams just 24 hours to plan out the navigation that will take them non-stop, day and night, over 500 kilometers of mountainous coastal terrain. For many of the racers, the preparation begins months or even years in advance. Some teams are supported by a corporate sponsor, but the majority have come here on their own budget. Raid the North Extreme starts on the ancient and mythical lands of the Haida Gwaii. Known to the outside world as the Queen Charlotte Islands, the mountainous archipelago sits off the northern coast of British Columbia, just south of Alaska. The islands lie shrouded in mystery and unchanged by the hand of man for thousands of years. One of the most beautiful and diverse landscapes in the world. There are 1,884 islands in the archipelago, a mixture of snow-topped mountains and fjords that plunge into the sea, mist-enshrouded forests, and wind-swept sandy beaches. The heart of the Queen Charlotte's is made up of two islands, Graham Island to the north and Moresby Island to the south. It is to this place that the athletes will come to compete in Raid the North Extreme.
These racers go into the most remote corners of the most remote places they can find. They're willing to go through anything to experience a place, and I hope that they go away with probably a better understanding of who we are and where we are than many people who live here.
Queen Charlotte Islands are home to the Haida, one of the most culturally rich and developed groups of people to inhabit early North America. They have been here for as long as oral history and archaeology have recorded occupation of the islands. As part of Haida tradition, the people of the community celebrate the arrival of visitors and perform a welcome ceremony. The athletes join in a traditional dance. They are blessed with peace and wished a safe journey while on Haida Gwaii. Before this race is over, some of these athletes will rely heavily on this blessing.
So we just had another team get a hold of us on the radio saying that they were requesting a medevac.
We need a pulse below the injury.
Team 21 is particularly worrisome because my wife is racing on the team. What we do want to do is make sure that they get out before night comes. Medevacs for our race are not common. I'm surprised.
As the sun rises on the Queen Charlotte's, the competitors line up their inflatable rubber boats for the start of day one of Raid the North Extreme. The course begins with a 15-kilometer paddle through Skidegate Channel. The 23 teams of 4 will race 500 kilometers over water and wilderness terrain that will take them through forests and snow-capped mountains to predetermined checkpoints around Graham Island and Moresby Island.
4, 3, 2, 1.
It's an all-out 6-day non-stop race, and it will be days before some of these competitors will sleep again.
You know, when you start last, there's only one place to go, and that's forward and up the pack.
Some will complete the ordeal, and some will not.
Beautiful, unbelievable beauty back here.
Averaging 5 kilometers an hour, it takes the world-class competitors Team Seoul just 3 hours to cover the 15 kilometers. Keeping mentally alert and organized under the physical stress of the event will be the key to this competition. Despite 2 cracked ribs and in pain, Cyril Rayan and his team Dark Noon arrived 4th.
These boats are the slowest boats I've ever tried. The endless paddle. Holy moly, I'm glad that's over. I'm tired, I'm beat. I'm glad to get trekking now. My daughter and son were pretty powerful. Hopefully they can keep me going for the rest of the race.
The team that has traveled the furthest to participate in Raid the North Extreme is Team Sart from Singapore.
We suffered. It was luckily it was sunny. Yeah, not much wind.
got you a little further behind than
A
you
little
wanted?
behind. We're pretty much in last place.
All the teams are out except two. One is just about to leave, and Team 10, Helly Hansen, is nowhere to be seen.
Team Helly Hansen Momar had gambled on their plan to portage their boats. 2 hours behind the pack, they arrive on foot. Helly Hansen Momar's strategy to portage their boats was a dismal failure. A broken wheel has put them in last place.
But this is our good leg right here, is the trekking, so it's time to make up some pace and get back into it. It's only early days.
Team Seoul is the first to leave checkpoint 1. They have 485 kilometers to go, and there are 88 competitors hot on their heels.
Oh, Yukon Wild.
Next in, Yukon Wild. They have come to this race to win.
Game 2.
Currently in third is the determined Team Supplier Pipeline. They use a tow rope to help slower teammates maintain the leader's pace. Starting out over 2 hours behind the last team, Helly Hansen Momar have to dig deep and rely on their training to claw their way back to the top of the pack. Ahead of them is the most difficult leg of the race. Teams must now navigate and trek through some of the most dense and complicated terrain of the race. They will climb just over 3,500 feet to an unmanned check where they must retrieve a secret code. From there, the teams will have to descend quickly to get out of the dangerous mountains before darkness sets in.
The way I've designed this course is I want all the messes to be done early. So the course essentially is front-loaded with difficulties. So it spreads the teams out a little bit, but it ensures that if they do get through the first trek, they're going to get through the second trek.
What was planned to be the most difficult leg of the race soon becomes the most treacherous.
I copy. Go ahead.
Chad feels that the team cannot go forward, and so they're going to move forward with an extraction process. Over.
Typically when a team calls in, it's a bad sign.
So I have the helicopter on standby. Give me a lat long coordinate for your location. I'll pull out the GPS, convert it to lat long, and give you a coordinate. Over.
Headquarters copies that.
For me, Team 21 is particularly worrisome because my wife is racing on the team.
We need a pulse below the injury and treat them for shock. Understand?
Meanwhile, the first team has made it over the treacherous mountain pass. Team Yukon Wild has blown past Team Seoul to arrive at the checkpoint, cold, tired, and hungry.
So.
Team Seoul and Dark Noon arrive at checkpoint 3, tied for second place.
How are you doing? Good. Right on.
Challenging?
Yeah. Much longer than we thought. Much longer, so. You can't give yourself the luxury of thinking ahead. Because if you think, after 12 hours, you're exhausted. And you think you might have 5 days left. It's enough to make you want to quit. So you don't give yourself that luxury.
Tired and hungry. There is no time to rest. This is all-out racing day and night. Weary from just climbing and descending a 3,700-foot mountain, Yukon Wild packs up and heads off in the dwindling light. Only one more team will make it off the mountain at 1:10 a.m. An exhausted Team SSS comes into the checkpoint.
Did anybody actually do that in 5 to 10 hours? Did Dark Noon come in yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, they came in here.
Oh.
Headquarters copies that.
Something has gone terribly wrong in the first day of the race that started with such high hopes.
If you haven't rationed from the beginning, you're out of food. And so then it becomes a whole different mind game because it's, what do we do?
Now, with food and water running low, and in cold, wet darkness, there are 80 competitors still on the mountain.
Where are they?
On the misty northern coast of British Columbia lies an ancient and mysterious archipelago known as Haida Gwaii. 92 athletes from around the world have come here to challenge this rugged landscape in a 6-day, 24-hour-a-day race called Raid the North Extreme. The absolute pinnacle of adventure racing in Canada, the 23 teams will compete by bike, kayak, and on foot in the extreme conditions of this mountainous rainforest.
Go forward, and so they're going to...
The race is less than 24 hours old, and already this land has taken its first casualty.
What has happened is Laval St. Germain on Team Supplier Pipeline landed on his thigh and gouged it pretty deep with a cut.
After we stopped, the injury became quite swollen, and it was apparent that he wasn't going to be able to walk out.
Well, it meant that we were obviously disqualified.
Well, disappointing. We trained for months and months and months, and it's an athletic goal, and all of a sudden it's gone, so it's bitter.
Throughout the night, the top 4 teams, Yukon Wild, Soul, Dart Noon, and SSS, bike to the next checkpoint. With the daylight of a morning sun, teams that spent the night on the mountain start to trickle in.
Oh my gosh.
Did you guys sleep at all last night?
No.
You shouldn't have called it a trek, they should have called it a trek and a half.
When the sun came up, it was still really, really hard to find where we were going. You can pick what looks like a good route and come up against a 30-foot cliff that's not shown on a map, and you're SOL.
You go into it and you're not really sure if you can actually do it. And then once you're out there, you're in control of your own destiny to a large extent.
There is news of an incredible achievement by the Helly Hansen Momar team. The team that had started the climb dead last after trying unsuccessfully rigging wheels on their kayaks have now clawed their way past every other team on the mountain to take over 5th position.
So that leaves 14 teams that these teams passed. That, where are they?
The Helly Hansen team, full run, right over the top of the mountain. Blew right past us. They stopped and chatted for a while. Yeah, and then gone. But yeah, athletes on sort of a different level, hey? For sure.
We didn't have enough food. We ran out of food. So we've been basically going with nothing.
That was all the food we had left for 10 hours.
The only reason that was left is because we portioned that for 12 hours. Did they see that? That was 1 bite per hour for the last 12 hours. I was dying out there. My stomach has never been in so much pain in my life.
What should have been a trek that the course designer did in 14 hours with pneumonia by himself has taken teams close to 20, taken the average teams close to 24 hours to do.
Woohoo! Helly Hansen Mama! Woo!
Over the course of the next 36 hours, the rest of the teams trickle in. Last place team Sart from Singapore displays amazing strength and endurance. The organizers had expected the mountain trek would take about 10 hours. It has taken Team Sart almost 2 days.
The Singapore team just got in. He wanted to go back and do it again. He said, we weren't determined enough. That was pretty impressive.
Bit of a hair raiser, so we decided to spend our time quite high up rather than risk encountering any cliffs.
Only 1 day into the course, exhaustion is already taking its toll. This is where training and physical conditioning will make the difference, and it will slowly divide the field into 2 groups: the elite competitors who are out to win at all costs, and the competitors who are here to challenge themselves. But both groups, elite athletes and adventure racers, all agree to win is one thing, but to finish the race is everything.
Yeah.
They'll have access to a paddle.
Yeah.
Only 4 teams are on track, and 18 teams are as much as 12 hours behind schedule.
Okay, copy that. Glad to have you on board and to be able to help us make those calls. So, Coast Guard is recommending that we shut down the paddle section for 4 to 5.
The Coast Guard has just released a severe weather alert with an intense low-pressure system sweeping in off the Pacific. It is now too dangerous to send the remaining 72 men and women out on the original course. Lawrence makes a decision. He will reroute teams on a shortcut straight over checkpoint 11. Now, only 4 teams continue on the advanced course. They are Teams Yukon, Seoul, Team SSS, and Dart Noon, with Cyril Rayan, who has been going 24 hours straight despite 2 broken ribs. The top 4 teams are in a head-to-head battle for first place as they enter Naikun Provincial Park. These top 4 teams have not stopped for rest or sleep for 36 hours.
Marceau tells us that the wolves in the Arctic, when they run together, they run 100 steps and then they walk 100 steps. So that's what we're doing, to move across this beach faster.
I think the race is more demanding than we anticipated, so we're going to need some sleep for sure.
Team Seoul and Dart Noon are neck and neck for 2nd and 3rd place. Coming into checkpoint 9, Cyril Rayan of Dart Noon approaches team captain Paul Romero and proposes a strategy to work together in order to close the gap on frontrunners Yukon Wild.
So, think about it.
Team Dart proposed to us to work together on this massive bike section coming up. Because more people the better on road sections. Because could move faster if everybody's working together.
The teams will use the technique of drafting, also known as slipstreaming. It is when competitors align in a tight formation to reduce the overall effective drag. The plan will allow the 2nd and 3rd place teams to make up ground on Yukon Wild. When the race continues,
my girlfriend is competing in the race, and we're expecting her here shortly. And I'm planning on proposing to her.
it is day 3 of a 6-day non-stop race in which 23 teams of 4 men and women walk, run, kayak, and bike over 500 kilometers of the toughest terrain in Canada. The race has turned into a 4-way tie for first place.
It's going to be absolutely technical.
Yeah,
steep, and
snow up there.
You wouldn't want to be up there, I can tell you that.
It's 2 o'clock right now. Seoul left at 10 minutes to 11. So they've got 3 hours on you.
It's going to take some pretty serious moves. Looking good, though.
When we're out there at night in the dark, and it's only the 4 of you, and there's no one else there. There's no lights. There's no connections to anything. And it could be 2007, and it could be 3,000 years ago. It doesn't, you know, you're just out there on the land, and it's really special, and you can feel a part of a culture that's there.
No signs of human, no signs of development, no signs of trails, no power lines, no. We were absolutely amazed.
Tired and exhausted, Colleen of Coastal Disturbance is suffering from an injured knee and severely blistered foot.
Yeah, it was a pretty long haul. I started having knee pain, and it pretty much crippled me. But we're still number 9. I'm so stoked about it.
Colleen's injury is slowing the team down, and to keep moving, her team have had to rig up a handmade stretcher and dragged her through the course.
I'm at checkpoint 12. My girlfriend is competing in the race, and we're expecting her here shortly. And I'm planning on proposing to her. And I got one other thing. What's this? You marry me?
The Queen Charlottes are really a half-submerged mountain chain that sits 100 kilometers off the coast of British Columbia. The Haida legend said this place was at the boundary of the earth. Snow-capped Mount Moresby is the tallest peak at 3,700 feet. Not surprisingly, at least for the competitors, the race organizers have decided to put a checkpoint at its peak. After the disaster of the mountain climb of the first leg, the teams have now gained experience in this mountain trek. This climb goes better, as the racers seem to have got into a momentum. Today, no one will get caught on the mountain for the night.
The two lead teams, Team Seoul and Team Yukon Wild, both arrived in 2 minutes apart.
Yukon Wild was in the front with almost an hour-and-a-half lead with Team Seoul and Dart Noon close behind. Team Seoul has now narrowed the gap, capitalizing on Yukon Wild's lack of sleep.
So that's pretty amazing in itself to have two teams that close after that period of time.
With a quick transition, Team Seoul leaves checkpoint 14, now in the lead, leaving Yukon Wild in a close second and Dart Noon in third. The relentless Helly Hansen Momar has made good time and continues to close the gap on the leading pack. They make a swift transition, and if they can maintain this pace, they will overtake the leaders. The problem is, this team has been plagued with bad luck.
I can't believe that.
But they've had a bit of an incident here. 6 inches before hitting the water, dragged the boat across a piece of metal and got a 6-inch hole in their boat right now. So they're trying to patch that up.
We have these patches, but no glue.
Yeah, these will take hours to dry anyways.
A guy here that thinks he can fix it, but we're not going to be able to hold much air on that side, so it's going to be a pain in the ass for... Yeah.
If they can't patch it up, they have to trek the 40K to the next checkpoint. Team number 10 seems to have had bad luck all from the beginning. So they seem to get behind, then they get ahead, then they get behind, and get ahead again.
More teams begin to arrive at checkpoint 14.
Right up.
Sleep deprivation and continuous physical activity take their toll on the competitors. At a time when organization and quick decision-making is key, many of the competitors are beginning to struggle. Some begin to show signs of what is known as bonking.
Bonking is a term for a racer who's dehydrated, hypothermic, and lost all energy stores to continue on with the race.
The pain caught up to me about 1.5 km from this checkpoint. I think I was like, yes, the trekking's done. So the part of my brain that was telling all the other parts of my body to shut up and leave it alone about, you're killing us, sat down on the job, and suddenly they all got through, and I sat down by the fire and I was like, oh, well, give me morphine. So I'm in a lot of pain, but I'm medicated up to the physiological limit allowed by the medic, and that should be kicking in soon, so I'll be a happy camper.
No gear bag. We actually sewed the outside of the boat in the hopes that that would prevent it from coming apart. Patch the inside. This is the bladder that holds the air to make the boat float, and we got a patch through here. I'm gonna put a bit more over the top, and we gotta get going. It's our last chance.
Finally, Team Helly Hansen Momar is ready to depart on the paddle.
Take two.
Soon after darkness has fallen, Helly Hansen-Momar's bad luck returns, but now will result in a medical emergency.
Mike's looking pretty tired right now.
Teams of 4 are halfway through Raid the North Extreme, having covered almost 250 kilometers of rugged terrain. Now, on the second stage of this 6-day race, some of the teams have already hit their breaking point, while others are coming dangerously close.
You having a good time, eh? Oh, it's so cold out there. When the two person sitting in the front, they get the coldest. So Karen was sitting in the front and I was sitting in the front as well.
Teams are taking up to 2 hours in transitions. After 3 days with no sleep, you lose track of what you're doing and everything slows down. So.
Yeah, what about camps? I hear you, Darren. I'm going as warp speed as I can, dude.
So mind-blowingly tough. The injuries start happening, you're hallucinating, the intestinal problems, all these things just start happening. You just got to keep pushing, pushing, pushing.
And here's how you're going to train for it. Fill your bathtub up full of ice. Don't feed yourself and try and stay awake in that bathtub, marching on the spot for about 2 days. Now, if you can do that, then get out and ride your bike instantly. And ride your bike in the rain for, a couple more days. And then fill yourself up with Oreo cookies, crackers, Coca-Cola, coffee, and pizza. Do that while you're still riding, and then you might be ready.
After just over 80 hours of continuous mental and physical activity, the 13-hour paddle to checkpoint 14B is testing the endurance of even the strongest teams.
Those boats, they move really slow. They have a top speed and they just move really slow. It's like running with sticky tape on the bottom of your shoes.
See you later, guys. Wish us luck.
Helly Hansen-Momar, who has been stricken with bad luck since the start of the race, have now patched a puncture on their boat. Just as the third day is coming to a close, a determined team sets off on the monstrous 13-hour paddle. But fate will soon intervene again and dash forever their hopes of winning this race.
Get you back together. Got back out on the water. Made it about 20 kilometers down, just over halfway through the paddle. And one of our teammates was starting to suffer from hypothermia pretty bad.
Initial temp 35.6, and that was at 2309. Level of consciousness has improved. However, his temperature is dropping.
Managed to get a fire going on the beach, and Todd's the biggest guy on the team. He's 6'4" and 225, and it wasn't easy to manage because he was pretty. He was definitely not himself out there.
Okay, well, that's Todd.
We made the call right at dark because we knew that we still had a good 4 to 5 hours of paddling to go, and it would have been a completely different story in about 35 minutes when the sun went down. So it's always a tough call to make. Never easy to pull out of a race, but we definitely made the right call. He'll be all right.
Throughout the night, the leading teams continue on their pursuit of capturing the unmanned checkpoints.
Put on the northeast board on bridge.
This is the stage of the race that will challenge the competitors mentally. The checkpoints can be captured in any order, so planning and strategy will now make the difference in standings.
They've learned a lot about how to work together as a team, how to work together as individuals with their strengths and weaknesses, and the last thing, they've dropped their ego. There's not one team out there that is going to lead this race and not accept help from each other. Every member of the team is going to accept help at one time, and every member of the team is going to need help at one time.
Team Running Free Dead Reckoning lost their teammate Joe Gabor due to symptoms of dehydration and exhaustion and are carrying on unranked.
Move on to the next one, I guess.
We struggled a bit.
Didn't have much water, didn't have much food, and sunburn.
Fighting to stay awake, the competitors must draw the line between reality and hallucinations.
We're just kind of fighting to stay awake for the last little section of road riding here.
They find out just what they're made of.
The mind and sleep problem. That's the only real issue right now. Tom was just dying. Tom up there, he was slurring his words like he drank, 10 shots of tequila. It was crazy. I saw him and he just kept falling back and falling back. Finally, I backed up to him. I said, Tom, are you all right? He says, yeah, give me one of those hot dogs. Yeah, right up there, give me a hot dog.
Teams continue to battle the mental effects of sleep deprivation. They now have to conquer it if they hope to make it to the finish line.
How's the pace, Nula?
When we come back, the conclusion of Raid the North. The top teams have only had about 4 hours of sleep in an 80-hour time span. Now, they must get ready for the third and final leg of the race, which will begin directly after the ferry ride back to Prince Rupert. The final Prince Rupert stage of Raid the North Extreme will take the top teams 18 to 24 hours to complete. Teams will once again inflate their boats and paddle through fog-shrouded Tuck Inlet.
That woke me up.
The end is near, and many of the competitors begin to take in the environment one last time.
What a beautiful view up here, though, huh?
In the early hours of the morning, exactly 94 hours and 19 minutes after the start of the race, Team Seoul crosses the finish line to take first. For the winning team, it was a combination of grit and full-out determination. But strategy and the plan to team up with Dart Noon on the bike leg on Moresby Island has paid off.
I found myself stopped on the side of the road twice to talk to somebody on the side of the road that wasn't even there. A little Mexican lady selling tacos on the side of the road. I kid you not.
The strategy also pays off for Dart Noon. They take second place after 102 hours on the course. Teammate Cyril Rayan is the Iron Man of the event, with 2 broken ribs, a sprained wrist, and a severe knee injury. Third place goes to Team Yukon Wild. They'd held on to first place for most of the race, but in the end slipped into third from lack of sleep and sheer exhaustion.
Able to go up.
Team Sart, the Singapore team, had never seen snow before, and it had taken them almost 3 days to complete the first mountain pass.
Chinese is 万人之上，无人之下.
Then, later in the race, they paddled in the wrong direction toward Alaska before they were turned back on course by officials. But they never gave up and successfully finished the race.
Yeah, the track was awesome. Yeah.
Unlike Team Sart, Team Coastal Disturbance, the local favorites, were familiar with the area. But with an injured Colleen Myers, they limped to the finish line in the middle of the pack.
They ran me up a 25-kilometer hill to our hike, and we killed it. It was awesome. Like, I'm elated. We couldn't even believe all the crowd that was here when we turned around the corner.
Team Supplier Pipeline, originally a hardcore contender for first place, were reduced to 3 members after Laval Saint-Germain was airlifted down the mountain.
Yes, the trekking's done.
The last time we saw Peter Dobos of Adrenaline Rush, he was about to embark on a 13-hour paddle at checkpoint 14.
You're killing us, you're killing us.
Based on the advice of medical staff, Peter made the difficult decision to withdraw from the race.
I was hallucinating some neat stuff, which was kind of good, because I'm like, I've always wanted to have some bitchin' hallucinations. You know, the boat in front of me was kind of floating up and left and right, and I kept seeing the checkpoint lights flipping from one side to the other. I think the left side of my brain, the right side of my brain were saying, no, I'm in charge, and no, I'm in charge. Instead of merging the two together, I'd get images just appearing and disappearing left and right, so that was pretty freaky.
In the spirit of the race, he rejoined his team to cross the finish line.
Oh, what a long race. Battle. Oh. Well done.
Helly Hansen-Momar had entered the race as a top contender, but their race has been riddled with adversity. They've had to overcome a broken wheel on a kayak rig, a punctured boat, a water rescue, and teammate Todd Noack's case of hypothermia. Yet they fight back, determined to complete the race unranked.
You just have to be really mentally and physically tough. I think we love the sport because it's not as regulated as your road sports like triathlon and Ironman. You don't train a year to take off a couple of minutes off your time. It's completely different training. You have to be tough mentally and physically from start to finish. You have to desire not sleeping for days on end and be able to push through what you perceive to be your absolute limitations.
It's when you get to the top of that peak that you've spent all day getting there, and you can see like all the way to the horizon of how far and where you just came from, and I think that's what makes it.
So to be a good adventure racer, you basically have to be really, really tough to kill. That's solid.
I am queen of the long range, mother of the valley, sister to the waters far below. I am stark, I am beautiful, a tapestry of color. I winter in a cloak of snow. From high up on my shoulders, nature is unfolding the road.
Travel consideration for Raid the North Extreme is provided by Intrepid Travel. Helly Hansen is the official apparel and footwear provider of Raid the North Extreme.